Good evening. I'm Melvin Marin, a senior pastor here at Grove Church. I want to welcome you again to Better Is Now, Tough Table Talks. Listen, we have been really praying and fasting about our topics and about how we can really bring change, not just to the Black community, but to the world at large. We have a concept here at Grove that Black wealth is about not just money, it's about Black consciousness, Black pride, and Black accountability. Black CPA. It's about building strength from the inside out. Tonight's discussion is fascinating as we really hear a lot about Black families, what makes up family dynamics, what is a family, the history of the Black family, the current reality of what the Black family is facing are some of the questions or concerns we have. Today, we have so many different looks or dynamics that really come into play when you talk about the village. When things in life happen to you, how do you respond to it? How do you respond to interruptions? How do you respond to when society says that the Black family ought to look like this, behave like this? How do you respond to what's happening in our culture? These are very important questions the church has to respond to. And so tonight, I'm very thankful that we have two millennials, two individuals who are excited about the conversation. And tonight, we want to hear from their perspective. So let me just share with you again. Black consciousness, Black pride, and Black accountability is about better is now. It doesn't start with your new car. It doesn't start with your new boo. It doesn't start with your new home. It starts with a new level of thinking. How you process, what's happening in your thoughts that really generate your actions. So tonight, I'm very happy to have Taya Dees, who's an educator, who's an author, who's a single mother, and who has an outspoken consciousness about who she is. I'm also happy to have with us tonight Isaiah Mariner. He's a poet, an educator, an activist in our community. And tonight, these two millennials will share with us on their concept of what Black family life is and how it has shaped them into the individuals they are now. So let's get started tonight because we realize even now that African Americans suffer chronic double-digit unemployment. We lead the nation in the rates of heart disease, cancer, HIV/AIDS. And nearly 1 million of the 2.4 million Americans incarcerated are Black. How does these things affect the Black family? And what is the Black family? So let's get started tonight. And I'm very happy that this moment is being sponsored by a wonderful person who believes in Better Is Now, the law firm of Charlene Mooring. So let's get started with these two millennials. And so they're going to allow me, the baby boomer, to kind of facilitate this moment to ask some questions. And they are real transparent individuals. They speak truth, and that's what we want. We don't want things cloaked. We want to speak truth that it might transform someone's life. And so as we move forward now, I just have a few questions. Let me get started on one question, and I'll come to you as we say, ladies first. So we'll do that. Taya, as we look at this, tell me about, first of all, how you interpret your childhood family dynamics. Tell me how you view it, your childhood dynamics now as an adult, as a single mother, as an educator, and as an author. Tell me, how do you view your childhood?
If we're going to be honest about these things, because we are being honest, I believe because my mother wasn't raised by her mother, she was raised by her grandmother, I got a older sense of responsibility and accountability up front in my childhood. My mother expected me to know what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. Did she teach me? Yes. And I understood that I was important to her, but I didn't understand what love was from her. And that was my frustration with my childhood. My mother taught me everything that I was supposed to do, but she never told me she loved me. She never actually cared for me. She wouldn't hug me. She wasn't kissing me. But did she put clothes on my back? Yes. Did she feed me? Yes. Did she make sure I go to school? Yes. She did everything she needed to by the books because that's what she was taught. She was taught to take care of the home. She wasn't taught how to love. And I think when it comes to my childhood, that is the only frustration I could ever express to her. Yes, you took care of me, but mom, you made it so I had a void. So I didn't know what love looked like. So by the time it was time for me to learn to love somebody, I didn't know how. Also, growing up, my mother was in a domestic violence relationship. It was normal for her. It was normal for me to see her fighting with a man. By the time it was time for me to be in a relationship, I did not know that it was wrong until it got to the point where I was laying in a hospital bed and I didn't know what I was going to do. I feel like certain things that she should have taught me, she didn't because she didn't know any better. And I think on my end, when it comes to looking back at my childhood, I would have rather had those lessons another way, but I'm grateful that I learned them the way I did because I know with my child now, I have to give him nothing but love. He has to know he's cared for. He has to know what love, an effective love, a love from God looks like, rather than showing him something that he can't, what's the best word? Matriculate off of, evolve. Okay. Everything changes with time. Okay. So I can't expect him to love the way I love, but I can give him a better love to be able to give to somebody
Foundation
else.
to grow from and blossom.
I try to use all the lessons. I try to make sure he understands that love involves accountability. Love requires respect. It has certain aspects to it that I don't think I was taught in my childhood, but because I wasn't taught them in my childhood, I know to give them to my child, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense. So you learn from the things that were done and the things that were done perhaps improperly. And so you learn how to function, and then you learn how to not just function, but then you learn how to live and what life was about. So one of the things that you mentioned to me, you said to us about love. You had the material things, but something was more important. And so as we look at Black family life, and to me, Black family life incorporates not just things, because as a baby boomer, we didn't have a lot of things, but we had what you told me you missed. That's love. And so now you recognize and you're offering that to your son as a single mother, and not just things, but things are still important, but you have a priority, and your priority is what?
Love.
Love.
And care.
And care. All right. That sounds good. I mean, I think that your honesty, because a lot of people are now living based upon what they grew up with. You're in the hospital bed. Isaiah perhaps have a different view, and we have grown, and people are still evolving in dealing with our own honesty. And so, Isaiah, I'm going to offer you the same moment to really share from your perspective about your childhood, about your family dynamics, and what you perceive to be, because we recognize that no parent is 100% on point to do what one should do. So talk to us about yours.
So at this point in life, I definitely got to see that at this point, I know that my childhood was a privileged one. Even when we started out in the smaller house on Airline, we still started out in the house. I had homies that started out in an apartment that was, half the size of the house we started in. So I came up with privilege, but I also saw and felt that like family as a whole wasn't just you, mom, Cortland, Josh, and myself. It was also the friends that y'all raised in that sense. We grew up in a privileged position. I had both you and mom. That in itself is a privilege because I have friends that didn't have their dad around. So to know that was key. Yeah, there were still a few things that were missing, but I think that that's kind of like a general family problem that we had at certain times, like dealing with your siblings and things like that, younger brother lying or not lying, whatever the situation might be, all of that drama that came, that in itself was honestly still like a privilege. Like, so for where we were, it was cool, but it allowed me to see that everybody didn't have it like that, especially because how you all were with us and how you all were with our friends and everybody else around us. It let me really know that, for one, nobody else is any less than, because their family's different, and we still got to show them some form of love. And I feel like that was something that y'all did a pretty good job about that. And I mean, you said it, not perfect, but y'all set us up. Y'all set us up right. So I feel like, for me, that let me know what family could be, and that made me want to find ways to give that to my homies. Like, had them come over just so they can be around you, because I felt like you are a good father. And if they didn't have that, I wanted them to still find a way to have that. I wanted them to still feel at home, be family with us. And you found ways to do that a lot. So now that I've grown, I really seek to do a lot of what you have done and more. I seek to stand up on my promise I made to you when I was a little kid. You know what I'm talking about, too.
And that promise was, I want to be a better man than you. My son spoke that, and I didn't take offense, because one of the things in the Black culture is that we stand on the shoulders of those who have gone before, our ancestors. And so if you could just kind of sum up that particular question, what would you think priority should be in the Black family? Is it stuff? Is it the things, materialism? We know we need shelter. We know, but love.
Where I was just at
Yeah.
for a moment. You look like you're going through it on this one. I'm gonna say that it definitely is to pick up the torch and go further. Not to repeat the mistakes, to give your kids what you had and the things that you did. To give them what you see that they need as times change. And I know that generationally, things have shifted. Some things definitely remain, but a lot of things are not as they used to be. So I want to make sure that I prepare my kids for where they're going, or and their friends. Like, I want to make sure that I prepare my family, not just my kids, but whoever falls into my family. And I feel like family's a choice. So the people that I choose to be family with me, I want to set them up to go further than I have before, and further than you set me up to go. You know what I mean? That really continue that mantle. And also, in the lesson, when I had told you that I wanted to be a better man than you, I was hurt because you weren't hurt when I told you that. The fact you smiled at me and I said that despite you was like, I still gotta do this, but there was something that I got from that was a little bit extra, and that was that I could do a thing to spite you, but it ain't gonna make a difference. You want me to be better. So me doing it out of spite isn't gonna be beneficial. And I think that part of our generation, and as a whole, when we talk about family, is the spiteful reactions we have to certain things that come up, either what may have happened with our families or whatever else happens to people out in the street. So
Let's deal with that aspect. Some of the things that we do out of spite. Did you find yourself doing some things out of spite because your mom allowed an abusive relationship to continue? Perhaps that's all she knew, or perhaps she didn't know how to get out of it. And so as we deal with those things, I want to make sure that I have the right vernacular too. I try to stay up on the current vernacular. So is homie a still a legit word? Is it relevant, or?
I mean, it's
Okay. Oh,
relevant.
never
It's
mind.
relevant.
Never mind that. I
for
just
the
want to
most
make
part,
sure.
that's just me, but that's still your friends.
Okay, your friends. So go ahead. Let's deal with the aspect of it.
If we're going to be completely honest and completely vulnerable, my mother expected me to be the best because I ended up leaving her. I went to live with my father when I was 16, and my dad raised me from 16 to 18. My dad is military. He's very strict. He's very punctual. But my dad tells me he loves me more than probably like 5, 6, 7 times a day. He knew it was a boy. When I got pregnant, I called my mother and I told her. And
How old were you when you got pregnant, man?
I was 19.
19. Okay.
I was 19. My mother told me that I wasn't going to succeed in worser terms than that. But she pretty much told me I wasn't going to succeed. I cut my mother off. I didn't speak to my mother again until I was 26 years old. I'm 28. It wasn't out of spite. It was out of frustration. It was out of the lack of, I think, empathy that I think I wanted from her because I had made a mistake. She had made mistakes in the past and I had forgiven her. So I expected the same thing. And when I did not get it, I reacted by cutting her completely off. I blocked her. I blocked her completely out of my life. And I moved forward. I tried to be the best mother that I could to my son, but I realized at a certain distance, it was stuff that she was trying to teach me in her motherhood that I would need to talk to her about.
Okay.
And that hurt because I did not have access to her at that point because I had cut her off. And even though I still had my dad, and I could talk to my father about anything, everything, and he's going to give me the best advice. But to be honest, you need a mother and a father. It's a reason why you have both of them. And not having that access to her, knowing I did it, hurt more than anything. So at 26, I made a conscious decision on my birthday to call her number. And she answered, and she cried. And to this day, we're still unpacking and we're still healing and we're still trying to figure out where this relationship is going. Of course, it's going up because it was rock bottom for a second. But I think allowing myself to let her back in spite of my own inhibitions to keep her out, was probably the best thing that I did. Not only because it taught me to be better about how I manage things, but it taught me about reaction. A lot of times we react out of fear.
Okay.
We react out of spite, of course, and we react accordingly what we think is about to happen. We want to prevent it. I didn't want her to say anything else nasty, so what do? I cut her completely off. She can't say anything to me if she's not talking to me.
Okay.
But had I handled that correctly, I'd probably be much further in my relationship with her.
I'm glad you said that because it really takes a level of self-awareness to really get to a place where I'm acknowledging that I cut my mother off. And within the Black culture, we have had things really hard. Black tradition is something that I know both of you have studied. The Black culture and family dynamics and slavery, the impact of how that had on parents and how those things continue even unto now. They're generational. And so you chose to cut her off and now you regret that. So you've learned some things. And so in the greatest lesson, I guess we can hear and move on from that particular question because those things really shape you. I mean, both of you. You know, Isaiah was speaking of the friends, the homies who would come around who were fatherless, and that was important. And you learned what not to do and what to do by watching your mother, and so she still taught you.
Oh yeah, I think as parents, we don't realize that we unintentionally and intentionally teach our children something every day. My son looks at me, he pays attention to everything. Sometimes I don't have to tell him what to do because he already knows, and I'm trying to figure out how he knows. But he pays so much attention to me because I'm all he has at this point.
See, your story is a little different than, I guess, some in the African-American families, because usually the father who's absent and the father who is kind of stoic, standoff, one who kind of, especially military, one who doesn't want to show emotions or affection. So you're the opposite.
My daddy loves me.
So you're the opposite.
My daddy loves him.
Your daddy's little girl.
Oh, I love
and so that's a wonderful thing to have a father who now understands the importance of not only buying things but also telling you, because this goes into how you view yourself.
Yeah.
And so many of us don't have a self-love for ourselves.
Yeah.
So
My daddy said, if a man can't buy me more than he can, then I don't need him. He was serious.
okay, if a man can't buy you more than he can,
And he doesn't mean buy me love. He
okay.
mean, he said, because I can take care of you. You can take care of yourself.
Okay.
If somebody can't add to the value of your life, then they're taking away from the value in your
And
life.
you know what?
You
I
got to be
think-
equally yoked. Most women want to come into a relationship and be given things. No, get it on your own, girl. And it's frustrating because the black family, I honestly think, is built upon the man has to be successful and the woman has to either add to his success or she has to be on a lesser level so that she can contribute to it. And I just don't think that's correct. I am successful by myself.
And I agree with. I love the dialogue, and I want to move on. But I love the dialogue because you're speaking generational differences.
Yeah.
In my time and before my time, those who were before me, the women didn't have to work or couldn't work because of the lack of skill set or
Right.
respect or honoring, and so they took care of the household while the man was the one who had to go out and work. That didn't always work out that way. Because women were the backbone not only of the family, not only of the community, but the
Right.
church. And even though they were the backbone, women were not seen as in leadership as they should have been.
Right.
So the question that I have for you, how did all of that shape your adult life as a young man now, as a man who's engaged? How did your childhood affect your blackness or your adulthood as a parent? You both are educators. So how did that shape you and help shape you into who you are? Do you wish things were different?
I think everything that builds you or everything that you go through grows you. It's a quote, everything you go through grows you. I don't think I would be as successful or as effective as a person, as a teacher, because my mother is also an educator. She was a high school teacher. I'm the same thing. It's crazy, right? I don't think I would be where I am had I not experienced the things that I did in my childhood. I would not value the things that I do.
What do you mean? So you experience abuse by watching your mother, and so now you've turned that into what?
I
And
know.
you've witnessed abuse not only with the mom, but you've also been a part of an abusive relationship. So how have you turned that for something better for you?
To be honest, it's a guide because now when I see students, because I do teach high school, I see students, I see signs, I see warnings. When I see all that, I can tell them where they don't need to go through a personal experience. A lot of times students, they don't want to imagine. They want to know. They want to see. They want to see the proof. They want to be able to know that this is true. If I tell a student, hey, look, you're going down the wrong path. If you allow him to hit you this one time, it might escalate. That's telling them a story, but it's not giving them the, hey, I was in an abusive relationship. It got to the point where I was 7.5 months pregnant. We got in a bad argument. He pushed me down the stairs, kicked me in my face and my stomach. I still don't have my ribs on the side. I still have fluid in my brain. I still have concussions that happened because I hit my head too fast because of something that I allowed to go on, the mistreatment that I allowed. It makes way more of a difference when they see the proof. And also when it came to my mother, watching her be in that relationship, it gave me both an understanding once I got out of mine, and both a recognition of her power and her well-being. My mother was strong. I love her to death. I think she is one of the most effective people in my life to this day, because she endured what she did to make sure she could take care of me. She might not have known or understood love until her second marriage that happened after I was gone, but she did what she had to do in the moment. She survived. Because she survived, I know how to live, if that makes any sense. People like to survive. I don't like to survive. I like to live. But she survived so I could live. And because I'm living, I'm going to teach my son how to live. I'm not going to make it so that he has to survive. So the lessons I learned were kind of in reverse.
but still learn. So
Oh yeah.
the power is in the lesson learned,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And so for Black America, as we're looking, there are different dynamics. I want to hear from you, and then we'll kind of move on and bring some closure to this and some sense of direction as well.
So for me on the other side, because I know that I came from and still do out of the like privileged position, right? Where a lot of these terrible things that people talk about that is their reality was far removed from my entire existence. At least I thought so. That now that I'm aware of these things and that I had that nice protected childhood, I want to find ways to protect my kids. Like, so right now, that's my students and all the other children that I interact with as a result of being an educator. But in the long run, I mean, I got 2 god kids. I'm gonna end up having my own kids. The desire is to keep them protected, to create and facilitate their safety and well-being, whether that be physical, mental, emotional, the whole nine. Where I come from now, I have privilege, so I got to use it to give back. I have to use what I have, what I was given, that blessing that I started out with, to show other people that this is what life can be like. It doesn't have to be trauma and hardship. There will be challenges, there will be struggles, but you definitely can have so much more than that. You don't have to just be scraping by, just trying to survive. There are definitely ways in which you can live, that you can thrive, that you can truly move up in this world.
So you both were kind of raised middle class, as we kind of wrap this up. Both raised middle class, but yet you still have some of the struggles that people in other classes have, especially those who consider themselves in a lower class based on economics, not because of identity, not because of purpose.
There's a lot of things that we deal with, especially in the Black family, that isn't like consigned to class. Like being out with your family and then like as a squad experiencing racism. Like as a parent, how do you deal with that with your kid right there when you run up on somebody and now it's like when we were younger, driving through certain places and you would see the Confederate flag, welcome to Dixieland and stuff like that out there on Eastern Shore, or some of the other things that we would come in contact with. That stuff right there challenges the whole dynamic, and that's something that's unique to who we are. So as a parent, or like, how do you deal with that when you see it? What do you say to them? How do you deal with the fact that some folk go and snub their nose up at you and act like you don't even exist when you walk past them when you're out in places, or people start following you around because you go in their store, or people want to touch your hair because you did something different? Like, yo, this is not your petting zoo. So like we got these different things, right, that all fall into it. Man, it's
a lot.
It's a lot to try to unpack in this moment.
Yeah,
it's
a
different
lot.
things that come with the family dynamics, because honestly, I didn't know my father. I didn't meet him face to face until I was 16. So I had no ramifications of knowing that it was somebody who was going to love me abundantly, endlessly, everything like that, until I was 16. It was family members that would come into the picture, family members that would say they love me, and I wouldn't understand it because I didn't know who these people were. And so,
but that was the village, though. And we got to wrap up.
That village,
but that village
is
in the
so
Black
important.
community that we had years ago, and I'm not sure if you are experiencing it now. And now that village is not just your neighbor or your brother or sister. Yeah. That village now, it becomes the educators. That village becomes the pastor of the church or the missionaries in the church. That village that we could trust perhaps isn't as obvious anymore. And so I wonder who's raising our children today. That's another story for us to kind of get into later on. So as we bring this to a closure, I really wanted you to kind of tie things up because you were brought from middle class and you had some of the positive things. Can you imagine how it feels not to have even things, or a mother or father who would tell you what love feels like, how to experience a genuine relationship where there is no abuse, where there is no verbal abuse? And verbal abuse is not just talking and profanity. Verbal abuse is silence and acting as though you're disappeared, you're invisible. So basically, as we tie this up, we have to consider the Black family is so diverse, but we all deal with some common things. But for you all, you saw parents survive in order to thrive. So the word for what word would you give the Black youth who find themselves in your position of having to deal with an abusive relationship, having to deal with watching it and now growing? What would you say to them? Even in one sentence, what would you say to the Black youth who never had what you had?
I will tell them to use everything that they see to be a better version of what they want to be.
Right?
I would say that your past doesn't dictate your future. Just because you haven't seen something doesn't mean you can't see something.
Well, listen, thank you. This is a quick moment that it requires more in-depth conversation. And I want to have that. So we have to come back because we know that in order to eat an elephant, you must eat elephant one bite at a time. And we want to make sure that we get into a conversation, that really, that really kind of sets the tone for us to really, really speak hope and truth into the lives of those who have totally different understandings and upbringings. But we must also understand that the family is so diverse. It's single parents, it's mother and father. And today we see other types of families coming in, whether we approve or disapprove, that's still a family unit. And so we got to understand that however we view it, that's still a part of our Black family culture, and that we must empower each other. And so to wrap this up, I know that many of you have some things to say. I love it. So we got to come back and deal with some more heartfelt issues that really speak to those millennials who are struggling in some area, who don't have a sense of right or wrong and a sense of decency or civility with each other. And so we'll do that. Let me say thank you to the audience for just watching and just listening. All we want to do is create a level of conversation around your dinner table, around your living room area, or on the back deck with your 40 ounce. All we want to do is make sure that you have a level of conversation that brings you into a place of evolving into a better human, into a better image of who God is in your life. And so, listen, you may have a different perspective, you may have a different approach. All we want you to do is have a conversation with your boyfriend, a conversation with your girlfriend, a conversation with your grandchildren about life. They shared some wonderful things about how to overcome, how to learn, how to stand on the shoulders of those who gave you life and those who gave you a good upbringing. But now they must understand that their responsibility is higher than what mine was when I gave them life. And so here it is. It's up to you now to have this conversation with your family. I tell people, don't let me run with my shoes untied. Take time with your nephew, your grandchild. Take time with your children. It is not the law enforcement's job to raise your children. It's not the school system's job to raise your children. It's your responsibility as a parent, a godparent, as a surrogate parent, a grandparent, a uncle or aunt. It's your job to make sure that the things that are needed for proper conduct and love and growth comes out of your household. Listen, thank you so much. May God bless you. We look forward to you listening again and sharing with us that we might know how better to formulate our conversation to help you. Thank you again. Peace, love, and power, and live your best life.